Maura Tierney, you play Helen Solloway in The Affair, and in season 2, we got to see a lot of the story from Helen's perspective for the first. And since you're front and center for more of the story this time around, was this a very different experience for you in terms of shooting the season?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't very different in terms of, it was sort of the same. I was, working with in the same different writers, but it was definitely challenging. There was a lot more to do, which was great.
And balancing two different points of view in season 1 must have been complex enough. But now that there are 4, was it a challenge just as an actor to keep track of who you are and whose perspective from one scene to the next?
Yeah, I mean, it is a challenge. I've said before, I think the actors get a lot of help from the hair and makeup and wardrobe departments, because we have really specific looks for each different POV. So sometimes we're shooting, 3 or 4 in a row, 2 or 3. So it really helps to be reminded when you sort of realize what you're wearing and what your hair is like and what your makeup is like. It helps to kind of click in a quicker way. So I depend on them a lot.
Did you have a favorite, wardrobe or sort of a character style based on who was perceiving?
Yeah, I mean, the funnest wardrobe and hair when you see Helen from Allison's point of view, because as they it's like a lot of makeup and usually very elaborate hairstyles, and the wardrobe is really. Caroline Duncan, the costume designer, said she wants Helen to look like she's from outer space in Allison's POV, and I sort of do look like I'm from outer space. So that stuff is really fun to wear and play.
In season 1, you played Helen S. seen through the points of view of her husband Noah and his mistress Allison, as you mentioned. Had you developed at that time a strong idea of what might have been going on in Helen's head, even before we got to hear directly from her in season 2?
No, I hadn't really. I mostly I was just thinking about how to service those 2 stories, the POVs of those 2 other characters. And that's what the writing was doing. So I hadn't thought about like in her own mind until they started writing it. And that's when I started examining it, because I didn't really need to think about it. It wasn't something we were doing. So yeah, it took me a minute to kind of hook into that.
Was there anything about her point of view, now that you've gotten to play it in season 2, that especially surprised you when you read the script?
Yeah, I think what I learned is that she comes to terms. Well, she's certainly not perfect, and she comes to terms with how not perfect she is. In Noah's point of view, she was kind of this perfect martyr, and then you sort of find out she's a lot more culpable and sort of what made her marriage vulnerable. And watching her learn that was fun to play.
One of the most memorable episodes for Helen, as she's seeing her from her point of view, as you mentioned, that she's a lot more flawed than she seems from either of the other perspectives, is the episode where she's arrested for driving under the influence after having a fender bender, and most of the time we've seen Helen before that she seemed more or less together. What was it like to get to play her sort of cracking under the pressure a little bit like that?
It was really fun. Under the influence before the fender bender, actually, it caused the fender bender. But I loved that episode because I thought it was really very sad and very funny. So it was fun to do all of that stuff and to, as you say, be a lot less perfect. And to watch the fallout of everybody's choices, how all the characters are handling that stuff. So again, I liked the comedic aspect of that episode and the kind of.
It's interesting that particular episode because, you know, from Helen's perspective, which is of course extremely skewed because, you know, she's high for much of that, and then seeing it from Noah's perspective, she's much more sort of manic in, you know, when she's behind in the backseat of that police car. You know, did you think in that case, you know, since Helen was a little bit you know, sort of you know, altered in an altered state, that, you know, maybe in that case Noah probably had the closer to objective reality kind of take on that one?
That's so funny. I didn't think of that, but you're probably right. That's, you know, it really very well could have been, because she's, as you say, she's high and drunk. So, you know what? That very well could be true. I hadn't thought of that. I mean, and you might be right. She's a lot less, she's more belligerent and less, you know, in her memory, she says to him, "Why are you doing this to us?" Just continuing to kind of taunt him. So you're probably right. I don't think any of the POVs are more true than the other ones, but that's an interesting theory.
It's interesting, you know, for Helen and Noah in season 2, you know, after their son becomes ill, you know, they sort of come to a kind of truce, you know, and we start to see them after that point. They're more open and amicable with each other in a way that we haven't really seen before. Even in season 1, before their marriage broke up, they didn't have quite that level of openness and you know, putting things on the table like that. How is it to play those scenes with Dominic West, you know, reconnecting in that second half of the season?
It was really fun. I especially like the scenes where the two of them go to that restaurant that they went to when they were kids. Because again, it got a little less fraught. It was a little less angsty. And there was like just a little more levity and comedy. Well, still the depth of their feelings for each other was there. So it just opened, it gave it a lot of space, I think, which was nice.
You know, the season gave, you know, other than Noah, you know, the season gave Helen a couple of other, you know, major male, you know, romantic interests. You know, and of course there was Max, played by Josh Stamberg, who is, you know, her and Noah's friend, and then later on in the season, her son's doctor, played by Omar Metwali, and those are such different dynamics for Helen compared to the relationship with Noah. Were those interesting changes of pace to get to sort of play those relationships opposite those actors?
Yeah, I mean, because both of those actors are great. And I think it showed this clear progression of their character. So when she was with Stamberg, of a desperate kind of this right now, and I'm going to be with a guy that I've known for 20 years, and he loves me, and it's gonna be fixed. Which was clearly really bad judgment on her part. And then when she goes with Vic at the end of the season, Omar Metwali's character, it's a lot more about her empowerment and her saying, "Sure, yeah, I'll have sex with you, sure." And it seems like, although, you know, one could consider that a reckless choice as well, but she just was more, it was Helen than about, "I'm just going to do something to fix everything for my family." It just seemed like the first time we saw her say, "Fuck it, you know, I'm going to do something that I think might be fun."
You know, the season eventually builds to the revelation of who killed Scotty Lockhart, and that mystery had been underlying the whole series up to that point. It turns out multiple people were involved, but that Helen was the one driving the car that hit him. You know, did you know from the start of the season that's where the story would be going, or did you find out later on?
Yeah, I did. The writers told me before we started shooting that they had basically, I knew all of that. I knew that she was in the car with Noah. I knew that Allison pushes him. So I did know that. I didn't know any details, but I did know going, because we did those flashbacks where she's in the office talking to the lawyer. At that point, the character knows that she did it. So you kind of had to have that information from the beginning of the season.
Yeah, well, did you know? Did anything surprise you about, you know, the circumstances of that? You know, how everything built to that sudden you know, that sudden event and Helen's culpability.
Yeah, I think that I loved the writing of it, because it's like sort of, I think the show is interesting to me because it's always about sort of people's, Sarah Treem, the creator, wants it to be about this sort of darker impulses. And it's a pretty dark impulse to immediately want to leave the scene of an accident. I mean, it's really a lack of character on her part. So, you know, it'll be interesting to see from that. Again, you know, it was an accident. However, her response to that accident is not a responsible moral response. It's a very self-protective, it's very selfish.
And it's interesting to think that, you know, because the season ended on kind of a cliffhanger with Noah sort of just confessing in open court, you know, to protect both.
Do you think there was a cliffhanger?
A cliffhanger in the sense that, well, you know, we know, I mean, this is what happened, and we don't know what's going to happen to Helen. We don't know what's going to happen to Allison or Noah, and how this is all going to play out. It was this high, you know, tense moment where, you know, it seems like, you know, the possibilities of the fallout in season 3 could be really really exciting.
Yeah, nobody's like in the clear in season 3. It seems like to me. Again, I don't know too many details, but all of them, every season it's about sort of with the choices, the consequences of the choices made in the previous season. So it's going to be tricky for everybody in season 3, I think, to deal with the choices they made in season 2.
It's interesting. Another interesting, you know, element of this story is, of course, the Cole character, who is the other, you know, the fourth point of view that we got this season, you know, played by Joshua Jackson. And what's interesting is, you know, there's been a lot of interconnectedness between the characters and interactions, but we haven't seen, you know, Helen and Cole very much, you know, sort of together, and in any kind. They haven't been thrown together very much up to this point, you know, to sort of, you know, commiserate about how their lives have been sort of upended by their spouses. You know, would you like to see, you know, that kind of thing explored in the future?
I don't know. I mean, I think that sort of scene of the two of them, I bet I have a feeling that Sarah, the writers, it seems perhaps maybe too. I feel like that. I don't know if that will ever happen in that way. I mean, I hope something happens, because I don't really get to do scenes with Josh except these big scenes that everybody's in, like a big wedding or something. So I don't know if it would be the two of us commiserating, but it would be nice if something could happen, because I'd like to work with him more. And I think the characters would be interesting together, but I don't know how that would happen. Because in real life, I don't know how that would happen, but I'm not sure.
But the other aspect of Cole's character, especially in season 3, is that when we find out, you know, all these, you know, the Allison and Noah and Helen were all sort of involved in Scotty's death, and they all sort of have most of an idea of what happened, if, you know, they don't necessarily all have the same kind of information about everything that was going on the road that night. But Cole seems to be the one who sort of left in the dark. He seems to be not necessarily blameless, but the most of the 3.
Well, I think Cole is culpable as well, in terms of, you know, if he had sort of kept to his word and let that character of Scotty be involved in the restaurant, you may not have gotten off the deep end, and may not have gotten drunk, and may not have accosted Allison. So, I mean, I think he is culpable in some ways as well, because he lied.
Is there anything that you're most excited about exploring in terms of the aftermath of the hit and run in season 3 for Helen?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be interesting and really hard to a lot of guilt, not only for what she's done, but that she let someone else, you know, get blamed for it. So I'm sure that does a lot of damage to someone's psyche. So that a lot of what's going to happen to Helen is sort of sorting out her, watching her deal with this two big lies.
Getting to see more of Helen in season 2 certainly seemed to pay off. This past January, you won the Golden Globe for Best TV Supporting Actress, and last year the show won Drama Series and Best Actress for Ruth Wilson. So what was it like for you to be nominated for the first time this year and then win?
It was very exciting. I was extremely nervous and really surprised because it just seemed like a super long shot. So it was really nice because I've been working on television for a long time. So it felt like it was a really nice surprise, and I was happy for the show that I was happy for myself, and I was happy for that it gave the show some further recognition.
I want to congratulate you again on season 2 of The Affair. Best of luck on season 3, and congratulations again on that Golden Globe, and best of luck at the Emmys coming.